Howdy, guys, gals, and non binary pals. This is Tales from the Waystone Summer Reading Program.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the sixth installment of our Summer Reading Program series on Travis Baldree's Legends and Lattes. We can rebuild it. We have the technology, where we'll be reading chapters 25 through 29 of the book.
Yeah, we kind of did the
Duck.
move of end the episode right before the epilogue.
I have a way to salvage that because it's going to be the epilogue plus the short story at the end, which is in many ways kind of a prequel. So it's sort of a bookend. I think it actually ends up working pretty nicely.
As always, the part that you skip. A brief introduction to the podcast. Each week we'll be examining a section of Legends and Lattes and figuring out what we can take from the text and apply to our real lives. We will also take some time to focus on Phrenimus of the week. And then we will share a recommended thing of the week. Finally, we will wrap things up with 7 words from our own lives and 7 words from the book. I said that backwards. I don't care. Before we begin, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. First of all, we are in no way affiliated with Travis Baldree or his publisher, Tor Books. Secondly, our discussions naturally assume that you've read this entire book, except for the epilogue, for some reason, which is what I did. Yeah. So there will be spoilers for the end of the book because this is the end of the book discussion. Also, a word to our community, please be kind to yourselves and one another and the creators of the world that we love exploring.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive in on chapter 25, which finds Viv and Tandri in the immediate aftermath of the fire.
So I'm going to say this. I don't want to blow by blow this whole section. I think that since it's the end of the book, we can be vague-ish. We don't need to do every little bit, but there are definitely some parts that I want to zero in on. But I also say that this hit me pretty hard in the face. We have friends that about a year ago lost their home to a fire, and I can only imagine the two of them in similar positions to Viv and Tandri. Now, they're a couple and have been married forever, so they're not also in the midst of the will they won't they part, which is light and sweet in this. I'm not complaining about that because I think it was handled well. But I really wish that it didn't take an absolute tragedy for a community to come together.
So, what I would posit is this community in the book has been coming together the entire time.
I'm talking in real life.
Yeah.
I'm talking, I don't want something that is a reminder of mortality to be the only reason why I ever see my friends or why I reach out and help my friends. I don't want the world we live in to only be a reaction to tragic circumstances. And I agree with you. The whole point of the book, the whole point of the Scalver Stone, the whole point of a lot of this is bringing community together. And so I love that throughout this entire book, we've been getting more of a cohesive community built around this coffee shop. I will say, though, that because in real life, a tragic fire where everything gets burnt down is 1,000% not low stakes, that the tagline of high fantasy and low stakes is misleading. This can definitely do with a trigger warning for people who have experienced this type of loss and also for people who have a fear of this type of loss because fire's scary.
Yeah. I think the theme that I keep coming back to is that, I mean, it's kind of a cliche at this point, but the whole Mr. Rogers quote about look for the helpers, look for the people who are helping is pretty present in this whole thing. Like all of the people who have become a part of the Legends and Lattes community show up to help out in their own way. Cal uses his skills as a carpenter and builder to essentially rebuild the shop from the ground up. And he gets started on the cleanup. He's there to do the immediate triage with Viv and Tandri. You've got Lainey, who is providing warmth and comfort, in that immediate aftermath. You have the Madrigal and her goons even providing help and clothing and support when otherwise none would be available. So let's talk a little bit about some of the help that people offer.
Well, first of all, I think most of chapter 25 is what it feels like to be numb, to be experiencing events but disassociating. I think Viv can't process what's happening.
Yeah, she's kind of in a fugue state.
She's been weirdly anticipating this, but even though she's been cushioning her brain leading up to this event, when it happens, it still affects her greatly. It's almost like there was no protection. It's like those temporary hit points just burned up without a second thought. And that feels very real to me.
Yeah.
I, because of my anxiety disorder, live with a feeling of a sort of Damocles above my head all the freaking time. I always feel like something's going to fall on me. And when bad things happen, it never has helped that I have been mentally preparing, quote, for bad things to happen to me. All it's done is rob me of my joy.
Yeah, sometimes that anxiety is like this alert that is only ever right by accident. But when those times when it is right happen, it feels like vindication of sorts.
So, interestingly, I watched a episode of I think Dr. Mike talking about the pit. I don't know if you know what the pit is. It's a very medically accurate ER drama on Max that I will never be able to watch because it's medically accurate and I can't watch people in pain. Anyway, I can watch breakdowns of it. And one of the things that got brought up was that one of the med students, I guess, said we should have had this guy on a heart monitor. And the main ER doctor going, no, there was no indication that he needed to be on a heart monitor. And then the person talking about the show, it was one of the doctors I watched, was saying, if you have everyone on a heart monitor, then you're just going to have a cacophony of alerts that mean nothing anymore because the information that they provide, it's no longer relevant or no longer triggers an alert in your head.
Well, and it leads to alert paralysis, where you have so many alerts going off simultaneously, you don't know how to prioritize the response to them.
I think he said specifically alert fatigue.
Yeah, that happens too. I work in IT, in major incident management, and we have some alerts that are so noisy and so often pointless that when they go off, like I say, they are right by accident, but it means that you start disregarding them when they come up because they are so likely to be irrelevant. So every time you respond to one of these spurious alerts, that's one person who can't respond to a valid alert. So you spend time and effort responding to that. And then you realize that if you start thinking about it in terms of person hours, it's not just 1 hour that one person spends, it's 1 hour for each person involved because the triage of that alert oftentimes involves extra validations from additional resources. So if I'm spending an hour and then I am also engaging 3 or 4 other people to respond on this, that is 4 hours of productivity that could have gone to something that actually mattered, all for a thing that is only ever right by accident. So let's go ahead and move to chapter 26.
I do want to mention one thing though. The major events that matter, first off, we find out that the Scalbert Stone is gone. And secondly, instead of going to a healer or a hospital, Viv, burnt skin and all, goes or is taken to Tandry's home to sleep it off.
Sleeping on the floor of Tandry's studio apartment.
Well, first sleeping in Tandry's bed, but then insisting on sleeping on the floor. Yes, because, right, of course she decided that she needed to sleep on the floor instead of actually, being remotely comfortable. And lastly, Viv does go back to the shop and locates the burnt husk of black blood.
Yeah, black blood was that reminder of her old life, the life that made this new life possible. And, as long as black blood was there, Viv felt like she had a fallback in case things really didn't work out. But there's no going back now.
Now we can go on to chapter 26.
So, chapter 26 finds Viv recuperating in Tandry's apartment. And Who should show up but Cal?
Cal, who already is starting in on the cleanup.
He's already making plans.
He is ever moving forward. I don't think that Cal specifically is encouraging ignoring the problem or shoving your traumas under the rug. What I think he's doing, though, is preventing the wallow.
Yeah. And I think he realizes that while Viv may need some time to process, that doesn't mean he can't already start getting plans in place for the rebuild for when Viv is ready.
But also, Cal, as characterized, is so non reactive. Not in a callous way, but in an understanding way.
Yeah.
He doesn't rise to Viv's level when the meanest parts of Viv's brain take over.
Yeah. Like he sees Viv at her lowest point and recognizes that she's sometimes saying things that she doesn't mean.
Or that if she were in a not as activated place, she wouldn't mean. I'm going to say this as a person who struggles with when I am anxious, being reactive rather than the measured, thoughtful, caring, empathetic person I want to be. I have a mean streak that I am not at all proud of. When I am anxious or stressed, sometimes hangry, and I am busy trying to keep the house of cards in my brain in one piece, and any stimuli comes in and it falls down, the meanest parts of me, the parts that want to lash out and hurt people the way I feel, the way that I am hurting, make people feel that same level of being upset. That's when the things come out that are not kind. And Viv does this to Tandri. She says something that she knows will get a rise out of Tandri and make her hurt in an effort to push away the help, to push away the love, to push away the kindness, to probably feel like she has more opportunity to sit with the meanest parts of herself so that that can be like some self-flagellation time.
I think also if we look at Viv's history, the mean streak, the unkind thoughts, the willingness to push others away was
The desire, not just willingness.
right. That was her bread and butter.
That was her protective mechanisms.
Right. She made her money as an adventurer, which is to say, a murder hobo.
That does take a toll. You can't live that life without it taking a toll. And I don't like it. I don't like seeing someone in a cozy, fuzzy, sweet, romantic setting treating people that treat them with love with a backlash, right? But just because I don't like it doesn't mean it isn't ringing incredibly true.
And what it also shows is just how much those people around Viv truly do care for her because they don't let her push them away.
In fact, I'm sure that Tandri and Viv in like a real healthy relationship style situation would talk about it when they're both calm, when they're both able to be less reactive, to be less invested emotionally in being right.
I think what we see most of all is that while Viv is worried that Tandri is trying to put the whammy on her or whatever magically, turns out Tandri's doing nothing of the sort. Tandri is just displaying empathy and kindness. Like, I think that's a far more powerful magic because it's real. Like,
I think I've mentioned before that with Tandri being a succubus, this is a very interesting take where, and yes, I've seen it before, but where biology doesn't have to dictate action or it doesn't have to dictate reaction. Like the whole theme of the book is that you can always be something different than what you were, quote, born to be. And I think that that's very strong and very important. I think that's something that's being shown throughout this book.
so they do actually end up sharing a brief kiss. And it's sweet. So the thing that I noticed in this is Tandri seeing Viv at her lowest point. Like Viv not as she wants to be, not as she feels like she ought to be, but just Viv hurting and vulnerable. And Tandri's response is not judgment or to rise to the bait or to fight, but it's to show love and compassion and caring.
Acceptance and a soft place to land.
Yeah.
I think I think it is a tragedy that we can't have a more explicit romance in queer situations that are written for a cis audience. Something I have definitely seen. There is a rise in queer representation in fantasy novels, especially since like I was a kid. Holy buckets. Anything that was representation was implied and not explicit ever, literally ever. But now we've got situations where we can have the representation, but it is so chaste as to be like, you still have to infer a lot, or you just don't get the deep relationship. You'd never get to that part because that would imply that there was also a sexual component to the relationship. And we can't have the deep, loving, secure, lived in yet. That being said, one author that I have been reading a few of his books recently that effortlessly is going through and doing things, and it doesn't seem like his editor or his publisher have put their fingers into it and said you have to cisplain or straight-splain. John Scalzi has characters with they them pronouns that he never explains, which is lovely, and I am very happy. He also has gay relationships and trans people that he doesn't have to explain past if they go home to Indiana, they'll be dead named. Doesn't explain dead naming. I absolutely love that. Also, there's not romance as a main plot point in either of the books I recently read by him. And I gotta say, it is refreshing as hell. It really is. Tangent. Sorry. But in this case, I'm glad that there's not like and now we have to explain that they're gay, or that we have to explain that they're lesbians, or we have to have the conversation of, are you my very good friend TM, or are you a person I can kiss? Tandri just kind of goes for it in a way that is meant to be comforting and sweet. And I gotta hand it to the author here. Male author, this is not something made for the male gaze. This is not something made to sensationalize lesbians. It's cute and sweet and slow, which, if you go by the stereotypes, is incorrect. Because by this point, U-Haul. Anyway, it's a trope for a reason. However, in the book, we're not quite there yet.
When I look at how Travis Baldree has written the characters, he has gone out of his way not to overly sexualize them
Yes.
and to lean away from the sort of sexualization of the other.
Especially with a succubus.
Right. Like, so Tandri is always wearing an oversized turtleneck sweater. Like, that's her court getup.
Yeah. It's cute and it's meant to invoke cozy.
It's not about being super revealing or sexualized. Viv is practical, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, these are characters who have reasons for being the way they are, and they don't have anything to do with pleasing the gaze of a prospective partner. And I think, you know, their sort of slow burn romance is two people finding out that they're kind of kindred souls.
There is a cynical part of me that is also like, if a homophobe picks this up and starts reading it and gets to the end and like has a problem with that, there is less likelihood of that having happened because it kind of frog boiled the relationship.
And maybe that homophobe will learn to be less homophobic.
Maybe. I did see a pretty neat kind of viral town hall meeting, or like some sort of local governance meeting recently, where an older gentleman was brought in to like have opinions and explain why he was so concerned over trans people or something. He didn't know any trans people. He had never been exposed to anyone who was trans. He never knew anything about what it means for the person who is trans. And he heard the testimonials from all of the trans folk that spoke before he was supposed to. And at the end, he was very apologetic for the fact that he was even brought in for this. He rescinded the reason that he was brought in. Like, he renounced it. He said that he couldn't speak to the transphobic
bullshit
that he was going to spout. He couldn't do that now because he was so moved by the rest of the speakers. And I think that was probably on Adam Conover's recent Factually episode about trans people that had some trans comedy writers and stand-up comedians as guests to actually speak to their experience. I think even in I don't know. I think that my one complaint that is an actual complaint is that we don't get an easier relationship between the two of them until the very, 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 very end.
That's fair. I also think that when you read the prequel, it actually explains some of that, and it's rooted in Viv's own unique experiences in psychology.
Then I'm going to happily read the prequel. Now, we have discussed when I would read that because we probably are going to do it for the podcast at some point, but it won't be the next one. Right now, it really does look like The Long Way to the Small Angry Planet is winning, and that's because we've had, besides us, one person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Opine on what the next book should be. And so, to everybody else, if you want to say in things, we're happy to listen. And it is a really good book, so I'm quite happy that we're going to be doing this. But that's what it looks like right now. And if you want to have a different book of the three we suggested, which is Long Way, or The House in the Cerulean Sea, or Bookshops of Bone Dust, you gotta speak up and let us know, because that's how we make our decisions. We like listening to you, and you can do that on Patreon. You can do that on our Discord. Link in the description, show notes, whatever. And then what follows is a rebuilding montage.
Yeah, over the next several days, we've got Viv and Cal and Tandri and Pendry and Thimble and the whole gang really coming together to help out in their own ways.
Even Hemington, who, again, my other complaint is that Hemington never gets to really be treated the way that I would like to see him be treated.
We have discussed those in the past.
We don't need to relitigate. It's just, it annoys me.
But yeah, we've got Cal takes charge and draws up all the plans. And he's got this attitude where he figures if they're rebuilding, they don't have to rebuild it the way it was.
Things don't always have to be what they were. We can have a bigger kitchen that can accommodate multiple ovens for Thimble. We can build an actual home for Viv, a place that's comfortable and not just born out of necessities. Like with a staircase instead of a ladder.
Yeah. There's bits where he's, having a very positive attitude towards things. Like he knows, like at a certain point, Viv is despairing over the cost of all this.
Most of her money was used in the starting of everything. And rebuilding a business, rebuilding a building, oh my goodness, so expensive. And her community helps her in ways that are like, because we know you're stubborn, we aren't going to tell you who exactly to repay because we know you want to and we don't need you to. It's the same way I am with people. We have friends who are on food assistance and or go to food pantries, right? When I was younger, I was too proud to take advantage of the kindnesses around them. I've volunteered at lots of food pantries along the way. And I also know that the people who need that are not bad people. That, in fact, are almost always incredibly sweet and caring and loving people. They just can't afford to feed themselves. And that's not a moral failing. And I have known that and not been able to apply that to myself when I really ought to have been on certain types of assistance. But at the same time, in those instances, it would have been nice occasionally if my friends who had better means than I did to offer to help me, eat. And that stuck with me. And I will never let a friend of mine go through a situation where they can't eat because of money, if I can help it. And I will never begrudge them extra. And I will never ask for repayment if I don't need it. If I need it or if it's something where it's possible, I will accept every other instance of going out to eat or like making food at home or whatever, I will accept reciprocal things like that, but I will never demand them. I will never ask for them. I can't help everybody, but I can at least make sure that the people that I know personally that need it can be helped in whatever way I can do. And that's what's happening with Viv here. She does not have the funds to buy the materials to rebuild her shop, which she gives the last of her money to Cal in repayment for the amount of assistance that he has been providing. Some things show up and there's no receipt, nobody to pay back, probably the madrigal, but there's nobody listed as a person to pay back, and no one will own up to having given her the gifts. In some cases, it's her former adventuring party that are like, hey, we like the cinnamon rolls, here's have some ovens.
There's no invoice so you can see how much you owe them or anything like that. There's no expectation of any of that. It's just people show up, they lend a hand, and they refuse to accept payment. They show up, like Pendry shows up for the first time really as a consistent presence.
Without his loot, turns out his family, stonemasons.
And he happened to learn the family trade pretty well.
And he just, nothing to it helps.
I think as brick by brick, board by board, stone by stone, things start to come together, Viv finds herself working her way out of that funk because sometimes at the end, all you can do is start putting one foot in front of the other and moving forward. Like, how do you walk from the Shire to Mordor? Well, you start by taking a step out your door, and then one step becomes two, becomes three. Next thing you know, you've walked all the way. So it's starting small with those little steps, cleaning out the lot, getting all of the debris moved away and straightened out. It's laying down that foundation. It's all of these little things that represent concrete steps forward. And with each one of those, and as Viv sees the community come forward to help her, well, she starts to feel a little bit differently. Like, she starts to wonder if the things that the Scalvert Stone drew to her are still there.
Well, it turns out that there's actually a character that knows a little more about that.
Ah, yes. Durius, our mysterious chess-playing gnome.
Who lays out that, no, in fact, that stone does not do what the stories would have you think, what the songs would have you think. It's all poetic language. The Scalvert Stone draws like to like.
It builds a fated cadre of like-minded folk.
So if you are kind and industrious, ambitious, hardworking, it draws together those that are like you, which are vague descriptions that could apply to Cal and Tandry,
Pendry,
and Thimble,
Hemington.
right?
All of these are people who value community, people who value, an enterprise that serves the community, who value bringing people joy. Viv didn't set out to conquer the world. She didn't set out to become the richest person in the city. She didn't set out to become a magnate or a tycoon. She set out to build a coffee shop where people would feel warmth and peace and comfort. And she attracted to herself a cadre of people who also wanted to do the same thing. They were all drawn, perhaps by magic, but they stayed because they liked what they found and they cared about it. And, Viv wasn't the only one who invested in the creation of Legends and Lattes. She was the brain trust that started it and was the original vision keeper, but every other person who was drawn there also contributed to it and made it a part of their lives and brought something completely unique that wouldn't have otherwise existed. So Tandry comes in with her skill at understanding human psychology and knowing how to put together a sustainable and enticing menu. And you had Cal, who comes in with the know-how to build the physical objects, the physical space, and then how to solve the problems inherent in that space, whether that's through the oven. Remember, Viv didn't originally think that she would need one. It's Cal who got that started, and without that, you wouldn't have had the cinnamon rolls.
Right. And Cal, who thinks that he wasn't instrumental to the success of this place. But we've also got Thimble, who is just himself a cinnamon roll, who is able to use his skills and his love of baking, of creating, to improve this space.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how he comes in and he tastes what's there and then figures out these amazing pairings that'll go with it. And he comes up with ways to solve problems that Viv didn't even think were solvable. Like, Viv didn't think that anyone would want food in the first place. And then suddenly the cinnamon rolls happened, and that solved the problem of demand throughout the day. And then she was trying to figure out, well, how do we have stuff after cinnamon rolls run out? And then we get our thimblets, aka biscotti.
And the inclusion of things like the croissants, and I'm sure that they're going to expand now to include things like the little meat wraps and other items that are more of a savory nature, and that Thimble is going to be instrumental to so much more comfort.
And then we have Pendry, who is kind of this odd one out. He looks like he should be, well, a stonemason. And then he also happens to have an amazing talent for playing the lute. And he's very progressive in what he thinks music can be. And he pairs that with an amazing singing voice. And he turns this place also into a place for music and live entertainment. So his voice contributes to that comfort. Again, all of these are things that Viv never even imagined as possibilities, but when they presented themselves to her, she was quick to have people sign on and become a part of that. And all of them contributed to something that was even greater than her initial vision. They all magnified it.
I think there's a reason that this book is almost the quintessential cozy fantasy fiction, and why it kind of jump started this industry around these books, around this feeling, around this comfort, this idea of a comfort read, this idea of coziness, this idea of warmth and caring and love. Right now, everything feels. I know most of you probably know about Kiki and Boba, where it's shapes that one of them's very pointy and one of them's very round, and you got to figure out which one you would assign which name. But like everything around feels very Kiki, feels very pointy, feels very sharp, feels very painful. Feels like you're stuck in a proverbial Iron Maiden, which I know is not a real thing, but don't really care. Everything feels like sandpaper on your skin. And the books that have been more prevalent as of late, that I've seen more and more show up, that kind of got jump started with this book, are a place to escape into where everything feels like it's soft.
And I think one of the things that I would point out with this book, obviously, we have this traumatic fire event. And what we see in the subsequent chapters is the resilience of that softness. All of those cozy things, those cozy elements, are not things that can just simply be destroyed by violence. They persist through that, and they're what help to rebuild from that. Like, a cozy sweater is not made for wearing in comfortable weather.
No.
A cozy sweater is for when it is cold and damp and hostile, and it's, there is genuine danger around you, and you have your cozy sweater that protects you from the elements, or a cozy little cottage. Like, a cozy cottage is made for a dark and snowy and stormy night. Cozy is about resistance and resilience. It's about decency in the face of inhumanity. It's about kindness when everything seems mean. It's about goodness when it's hard to be good. Like, coziness is battle tested. Coziness that is never challenged is just fluff.
There's nothing wrong with fluff.
There's nothing wrong with fluff, but they're distinctly different. Coziness is sturdy, it's resilient, it's something with a little bit of steel to it. It's about making a choice. to be kind, to be welcoming, to be warm.
It's a type of armor against the elements, whether those elements are weather or whether those elements are existential or psychological harms. And I think you're right. When things are comfortable, I don't seek out my sweaters and my tea, my little fireplace. When I am at an easy rest, self-soothing does not have to be viewed as a negative thing. In fact, actually, I think it should be looked at as a positive thing.
Yeah.
To end the story, Viv recognizes and acts on that recognition. The fact that her friends are what makes this place. That her relationships, that these loving people that have worked with her to create this, that they also need to be recognized as creators of this. And so she has drawn up papers that formally recognize the partnership that has been created in the creation of this shop.
It's kind of funny, of course. Cal immediately protests. He's like, well, I don't work here,
But he literally built the building.
with his own two hands.
Right.
Like, and I love how Tandree's the first to head him off at the pass on that. And she says, well, I'm sure that you'll be around to solve all kinds of problems that we come up with. And he's like, okay, yeah, you got me there.
Like, you're not going anywhere. Sign the damn paper. So Cal and Tandre and Thimble and Viv are now equal owners of the shop because Viv understands how to put her ego aside and recognize the accomplishments of others.
And it's kind of a new adventuring party for her. Her old one was her and Rune and Galena and Tavis. Oh, yeah, and Fennis too.
The token evil character, anyway, who will almost certainly get his comeuppance in I think the word is schadenfreude.
I think it feels more karmic.
Sure. And so we've got that, and then we've got, at the very end of the book, speaking of U-Hauls and lesbians and tropes, anyway, the upstairs loft now contains 2 bedrooms, one for her and one that is clearly for Tandre, should Tandre decide to move in.
And most importantly, they're actual rooms where people could live and not just subsist.
Yes. And Tandre's is full of art supplies. Now, before we're absolutely done with this week's section, I did tear up at one thing in particular. Tandre remakes the chalkboard with the menu, and at the bottom of this grand reopening menu, she writes, "What flames could not consume never shall be extinguished." And I'm tearing up now again at that.
Same.
One of our lovely people over on Discord has, when we read Song of Achilles, and when I was specifically saying that I wanted to read that or was about to start in on it, said, "I like to be hurt by books." I have definitely found that in my, I'm going to actually start reading more again, adventure. The books that make me cry are the ones that stick with me the most.
Yeah.
I am a softie, and so are you, and I love that about you. I think that that's a great time for us to kind of move on to our phronimos.
It's your turn. Who did you pick?
Cal, for the simple reason that he acknowledges that pain and painful things have happened. And he says, I'm not going to let that stop us. I've already started the process of the cleanup, and we're going to make it better than it ever was. This is a great opportunity for us to make permanent the improvements to the temporary situations.
Yeah, he recognizes that, there were constraints in the old building. It was a former livery, for Christ's sake. And, he would have had to do some major structural overhauls to be able to accommodate a larger kitchen, to handle the extra ovens and all that stuff. And, well, all of that stuff's gone now. He doesn't have to build on that existing infrastructure. He can build it the way he wants.
One thing that strikes me every time it happens, so there's this whole sunk cost fallacy issue, right? Where I have to keep going even if I don't like something because I already did so much work on it that it needs to just go forward and damn whatever mistakes were made. But if I ribbit it, if I frog things and go back to a state where things were clean and okay, and rebuild from that point. It is both better and faster when I've already gone through all of the mistakes and then I tear it back to the studs and try it again.
Well, and like the other thing that we see is that Cal recognizes that the thing that's going to heal Viv is moving forward and rebuilding and building in ways that are even better than before, that are more sustainable, that are actually built with all of these wonderful things planned for, right? Like, she didn't plan to have a kitchen. That just kind of happened. She didn't plan to have a stage. That just kind of happened. She didn't plan to really have a serious living space.
It just kind of happened.
So when Viv makes her proposal of an alteration to add actual living space in the loft, he's thrilled for her because he knows that that's something she's needed and now they can design for it. And he knows that she's going to need this. He doesn't force her to take lead on any of this because he knows she's not in a space to take the lead on this. So he picks up that slack. When she's in utter despair in Tandri's room when he goes to visit her, he knows that she's not in a place to make decisions. So he has it all ready to go. He has plans in place so she doesn't have to make those decisions, so that she can just kind of show up when she's ready and it's there ready for her to go. Like, if we look at our friends who had their own house fire experience, one of our mutual friends served as the point person for all of the coordination of recovery, making sure that our friends had places to stay, food on the table. When people would send gifts and things like that, he made sure that they had a spot for it to be received and then distributed when appropriate. He made sure that they had all their paperwork ready to go for insurance and helped them handle all of the logistics involved in all of that so that our friends could focus on just recovering, emotionally after all of this. All of the overhead he picked up and handled. And I see Cal kind of taking that position. He's handling all of the logistics and coordination when Viv and Tandri are too scarred and traumatized to do that on their own. And it's not that, that they can't do this stuff normally, but they're in a position where they're not able to. So he does it. He doesn't even ask or anything. He just takes the initiative to be there for them and take that load off. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a good pick.
Thank you. You have thing of the week this time. What'd you pick?
So I am going to once again stress the importance of going to your local bookstore or library. Look, we know there's a lot going on in the world right now, and as tempting as it can be to doom scroll through your social media platform of choice for the hottest takes, the meanest dunks, and the most outrage inducing comment threads, it's worth taking a step back and examining your information diet. How much of what you're reading or watching or listening to is actual new or useful information, and how much of it is just a series of reactions to a single event. If you're looking at most social media, the amount of useful information you're getting is pretty low, and most of it is just outrage that feeds anxiety, anger, and general negativity.
I mean, it's why we stopped being on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram isn't quite as bad, but it's still like I don't see my friends' stuff. I see ads.
Yeah, I've found that my Instagram is very rarely filled with content from people that I actually know or care about. It's almost all posts from brands and promoted posts and things like that, and very little of utility to me. So I'm going to suggest specifically when you're going to a bookstore, look for fiction. Fiction has the power to transport us to different worlds and imagine different ways of life, different perspectives, and different experiences from our day-to-day realities. In short, good fiction can build our empathy muscles. These are the muscles that are needed for meaningful resistance. They help us to build and hold to our convictions about the value of other human lives and think carefully about our impact on other people. There's a reason why we always have our phronimos of the week. So I realize that it's been a while since I actually explained what phronimos means. According to Aristotle, the way that you understand what a good life is or what is practically wise is by looking at the example of someone else. So the phronimos is what he calls a model of practical wisdom. And your phronimos can be a real person or a fictional person. It doesn't really matter. It's just a model that you start using to try and figure out what would a wise person do in this scenario? How would they respond? And then you try and emulate that. And as you try and emulate that, you become that person in a way, or you become like them, and you become somebody else's Phronimos. So fiction is filled with these. This book, like we've had numerous examples of how people can behave in extreme circumstances in ways that are constructive and useful and ways that are kind and wise. Fiction gives us that. And it encourages us to imagine possibilities rather than seeming inevitabilities. Viv spends much of the book dreading the inevitable discovery of the Scalvert Stone and the destruction of what she's built. And that does come to pass, but it's not the end. And it's in the end that she discovers the possibilities of what the shop can be. All of those things that she really wanted it to be, but had kind of made compromises for, she doesn't have to. She doesn't have to be beholden to them. And so you have characters like Cal who are saying, okay, well, let's think about possibilities now. We don't have to do a complete replica of the original. We don't have to build it to the exact same specs. There's possibilities there. And I think that it's important to stay abreast of what's happening. We still keep up with the news, but instead of watching endless reactions to the news as we're getting ready for bed, we spend our time looking at practical models of how people behave in trying circumstances. And it's rejuvenating and restorative. It's restful. So then when the next day arrives, we're ready to face whatever new problems arise. We are thinking about what we can do about things instead of how angry we are about what is. And I think that's the real value of fiction. That's the real value of, living a life of books. It prepares you to look critically at the world around you and make decisions and take action instead of being paralyzed by outrage.
Are there any particular books you want to recommend this time around?
So I am going to plug our next book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Unless people vote otherwise.
This is a book about people from different cultures coming together in community and celebrating one another's differences and finding value in them and building a new family of their own and thinking complexly about what it means to come into contact with people who aren't like you. And I think it's a challenging read, it's a fascinating read, and it gets you thinking about the endless possibilities of what it means to be conscious, what it means to live in the world with people who aren't like you, and think about what a world like that looks like.
I also really feel like the follow up, which is A Closed and Common Orbit, did a really good job at looking at what does humanity mean. And I think that, yes, those are very important and very well written books. I would say that if you're looking for something that is on the lighter side and will make you laugh more than it will make you cry, look at Starter Villain or Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. Those were definitely good palate cleansers after I read Under the Whispering Door, which made me cry so hard, and then also Song of Achilles, which made me cry so hard even though I knew the ending, because it is the retelling of the Iliad. I think it's a good idea to, if you are the type that likes to be hurt by books, to also find things that are pure joy.
Agreed. And like Trent Reznor used to say back in the year zero era, art is resistance. Don't let them steal your joy. Don't let the bastards win. Find the things that make you feel empowered. Find the things that help you feel centered in your values. Find the things that remind you of possibilities, and then use that to fuel your endeavors.
I like that. I think that that is a great way to lead us into our 7 words.
All right, you had words from the book this time. What'd you pick?
So there are two that kind of stick out at me. One is just sweet, and it's Tandri, said Viv quietly, stay a minute. And then the one that I actually think just epitomizes this whole book. There's something else I want to change.
Those are good ones.
I think that change doesn't happen solely by accident. It can happen by accident, but I think lasting and meaningful change happens on purpose.
I also think that while change can be scary and it can be risky, it can also be incredibly rewarding. Having the mindset to allow yourself to look for the possibilities can help you get through those changes because they are inevitable. Changes will happen sooner or later, whether you want them to or not. And if you are of a mind to make changes yourself, you have some control over it and you can affect positive change, not just simply change for change's sake. So I think you're right.
And what are your 7 words this time?
So these are words from our game master on Lockstitch.
Which, by the way, everyone should definitely just check out Lockstitch on Twitch. It's so much fun.
So his words to us after our most recent session were, "You two are wild to play with."
Like, so wild to play with that he's like, okay, we have to get you and the other 2 people that you played with. We have to have all 4 of you in the next game together. And we have to schedule it now, so that we can make sure that we do this because this is insane that you guys did this thing and we need to follow it up, but we can't right now. Oh my God. What did you do?
Did we magically transport the party to high fantasy Cabot Cove, Maine?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Because of course we did. There is a running joke. Should you want to understand any of it, just look for the 2 of us playing. I play Vidra, Will plays Arthur. If you see the 2 of us together in recent episodes on YouTube, because they do put it on YouTube and there are links to it in our Discord, definitely, just like if you want to know what we're talking about. So much fun. So messed up. So much fun.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone.
Join us next time as we actually read the epilogue to this story and the short story to come after.
We'd like to thank our friend Shawnee Jang for our theme music.
And to Travis Baldree for creating this wonderful world that we have enjoyed exploring.
Writing and project management, courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough. No.
Why did you call yourself me?
I don't know. I read the...
Okay, how about you actually just do the thing?
Okay. Writing and project management, courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
What did I actually say? And audio production and editing, courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough. Or Will McCullough if you're, Will.
If you're mixed up like me.
Anywho.
So naturally, if you'd like to help support us and have the means to do so, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/waystonepod. We've got extended show notes, early access to our episodes, plus we have solstice and equinox pods.
Right now we've been reading I Hate Fairyland by Scotty Young and doing kind of breakdowns of that. Mostly it's just a whole bunch of nerdy stuff. So, yay. I think our next one is probably going to be Paper Girls.
That's a fun one.
Mm-hmm. So there's like 5 or 6 of those, and we'll go through those over the next year and a half-ish.
Well, as always, here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding! Good job.
Wow, the cat.
He's just such a character.
He really is. He sounds like he's dying, but he's fine. He picked it up from our other cat.
This is how I play now. This is play.
I pick things up, I walk around the house, and I try to meow with it in my mouth.
He hears us.
Sokka, we're busy.
I love him. He sounds so sad. Listen to that.
And now that you've said listen to that, he won't do it again.